Hey guys, this is Dang16. Welcome back to the MTT Principles series. Today we're going to get started with episode number 2, where we are going to focus on the early game. Last week's episode, the opener, was very basic, as I prefaced it would be. Wanted to give the brand new and novice player the opportunity to understand MTTs, exactly what they are, structures, all that stuff that we discuss. Once again, very basic. Today is going to, be the beginning of the concepts and the real content of the series. Today we're going to, utilize the PowerPoint for some discussion, as well as some hand histories, some real life examples. So that is my goal, and this is my first series, and I want to get a lot out of it, but I've also been torn the last couple days as I've been trying to work on these videos, exactly what to put in, what to not. I think just trying to make it too perfect and really a blueprint. And it's just not possible. We could have the entire first series dedicated to the early game only. And that being said, I'm going to put out, some stuff that I think is good, and it's going to help and hopefully address some of the tougher situations and questions that you may have about the early game. And after that, I want you guys to comment on the videos, PM me, talk in the forums about what's good and what was bad, because I would like to, really go into some concepts further, especially, but only stuff that you guys want. So please let me know. Let me know what I do well, what I don't. This is my first series. Done plenty of coaching, but not videos just like this. So please, by all means, let me know what's going on. So let's get started. First, we're going to talk about some strategies, some other considerations. As you can see on the screen, developing reads as well. Then we'll briefly discuss pre-flop ranges and some post-flop concepts. So we'll talk about the pre-flop, talk about the type of hands and ranges I will play from certain spots, and then we'll discuss post-flop with hand examples. Now, the hand examples will tie in a lot of the pre-flop stuff and post-flop. I just don't want to pull up a hand where I fold ace-jack offsuit out of position or under the gun. I don't think that's a very good use of time in video. So instead, I will discuss the type of ranges I play in the positions, and then with the examples, try to tie it all together. Say, maybe the difference between a pair, just a moderate hand in early position and a moderate hand in late position. Yeah. All right. Let's quickly discuss strategies. Your basic strategy is going to stem from how tight or how loose you play and what you do in different positions. Both have their pros and cons. Playing tight allows you to really develop reads, get deeper into the tournament, not put too many chips at risk, but the con may be you lose some value. You do miss some spots. You might not have the opportunity to steadily gain. In a tournament, our goal, we want our chip stack to go up, kind of like going upstairs. We don't want it to be a roller coaster, big up and down. So that being said, the tight, being tight allows you to stay in it, but we might not have that steady build that we would like just because we're not being active enough. Playing a very loose strategy allows you to do a couple different things early. You might be able to exploit the players that are playing really tight because the average field does play tight, especially the tournaments that viewers are playing, $50 and under. So yeah, you could take advantage of it. You can also build an early chip advantage. If we're able to double the 6K early in a 3,000 starting stack field, and then we run kings and aces for a 3,000 chip pot, we're still in the tournament. So being aggressive early and building the stack allowed us to get that cushion and stay in the tournament. So there's always pros and cons with everything, especially how you play tournament poker. Bottom line, the best players can play a really, really tight nitty strategy or a really loose, crazy strategy or something that's right in the middle depending on the table. Best players are always capable of adapting and recognizing these situations, and when to slow down or when to speed up is something that'll come with experience, but I will also, talk about it to an extent, but really recognizing these situations comes from experience, but I'll do my best to explain some situations where it happens. My default strategy is I try to play a mix of all this. Early, I tend to lean towards the tight side, especially in a tournament where I don't have any reads. I don't know what the table's going. I've got a bunch of randoms. Huge field on Sunday. The big $55, DNG on Sundays on Stars. A lot of times I don't know anybody at my table. I might have one note, and that's all right. I'll just play tight pretty early, try to adapt to the game, utilize the Hold'em manager stats that I'm using, maybe utilize some other sort of read, such as like a database read if I don't know anybody, maybe check them out on SharkScope or Official Poker Rankings, stuff like that. Other ways to develop reads, just really it just comes to paying attention. You can get away with being a winning player without using any other sort of information, databases or Hold'em manager. If you pay good attention, utilize taking notes, the color coding system on Stars and Full Tilt's a great tool. I really like to use it. Green for a really bad player, red for a really good player, and something in between for everybody else. We'll use orange for a player that has a lot of experience, that's got a winning background, if I've checked him out on SharkScope or something, and then a blue player might be a relatively inexperienced player but has had a little bit of success. Find what works for you and use it. Really, I can't stress notes and reads better. I've been really amazed by the database of notes some players have, and it's just a massive, massive advantage. Another consideration we need to take into account for our strategy in the early game is going to be full ring versus shorthanded. Shorthanded, a 4 or 6 max tournament, we're going to have to adapt, and the value of hands is different. Ace-9 suited under the gun in 6 max is really like the cutoff it's really like the hijack in a full ring game. And, we need to take that into account. So bottom line, it's just more adapting. It's knowing when to do what, where and why, and we will try to discuss this as we go, but I'm really going to focus for the most part on full ring hand histories. The last consideration I have up here on the PowerPoint is going to be rebuy and turbos. Early game, it's going to be deep no matter what, even if it is a turbo. Of course, unless it's one of the super turbos where we start with 10 blinds, but it's still going to be pretty deep. It might be 70, 80 blinds deep compared to 200 or 300 or a super stack that's even bigger. But bottom line, turbo, the first level or 2 or 3 of a turbo is still going to be deep. So we're going to be playing pretty similarly. Rebuy, there's obviously going to be more time to gamble, more opportunities to get bigger chips. If 6 people shove in front of me in a rebuy the first hand and I have 8-9 suited on the button, I'm going to get it in there and give myself the opportunity to, 6-7 times my stack. So just keep in mind with rebuys, they're gonna play a lot similarly, but some guys are going to be very aggressive or crazy, and you might be as well, but it's still deep stack. It's still early game. For the most part, it's the same. It's the same game. We just might. It might be. It's gonna be just come. It's gonna come down to adapting to the table. We might be getting ace king in a lot earlier than you might be accustomed to, but that's all right. Just something that you need to take into account in the early game. Consider all factors in every single hand. All right, real quick, let's talk about pre-flop ranges. Just this one's just going to be a quick discussion talking about each. I'll give you a semi range and when I will start to open it up. Then after this, we will get into that post-flop stuff and a mix between the pre-flop, the post-flop, using hand examples. Early position, under the gun 1, under the gun 2, I'm tight until I have reads or something that gives me reason to do something else, whether that be attacking a certain blind or just attacking an overall really tight table. Give you a quick tight range. For me, it's going to be ace jack suited plus, so ace jack, ace king, ace queen suited, ace queen off plus, king queen suited, king queen depending on the table, and any pair. I'll continue to play any pair from early position just because sets are so disguised. It's different than playing 4 or 5 suited where it's going to be a wet board when we hit it. Pocket twos on 2-5 queen from early position will get you paid a lot. So yeah, I like to stick tight early. That's the type of range that I will play, and it's pretty similar to what I'll be playing in middle position as well, the next couple spots. This is where we can definitely start to open it up depending on the table again. Maybe we have a player that maybe we're a couple orbits into the tournament, we're in middle position. We just have a guy that's limping every single hand and playing very poorly post-flop. So this is a player that we want to attack. From middle position, maybe we'll start pounding this limper by raising his under the gun limps with some lighter holdings. Maybe the king jack suited, ace 10 suited, ace 9 suited, stuff like that. But for the most part, I'm still sticking pretty tight. For you guys that are new to tournaments or transitioning, just be tight until your skill set starts to progress and you better recognize spots that you are capable of opening up and spots where you are attacking a bad player, etc. One thing about the early and middle positions that I always want to touch on, and just in poker as a general, is aggression. I'm not a limper. I don't open limp, especially from early position. I don't want to give any information away to the rest of the table. So that being said, a hand like Jack 10 or some else speculative, 8-9 suited, a hand you might be limping under the gun, it's no good. A lot of the time, you're just giving away chips because you're not going to have the information post-flop. You don't have the information pre-flop. And they're just marginal holdings for the early position. So, if it's a hand that you've been limping a lot, something like Jack 10, King 9 suited or something in early position, get those out of your range. Just focus to that tighter range that I was talking about and open your entire range. If you have pocket twos and you limp it under the gun, even if it gets all the way to the big blind, we have position on him, but we didn't take charge of the hand pre-flop. Take charge of the hand pre, open your entire range, and we'll talk about situations later on in late position, like mid-late, where there is some potential for over-limping behind other limpers. So middle position, just as a recap, it's pretty similar to the same type of range. The playing all pairs, especially if unopened to me. Good big aces, especially the suited ones. And probably throwing in some more of the Broadway cards, the King Jack suiteds, the King Tens, on a tight play table, stuff that I wasn't playing under the gun or under the gun one. All right, late position. Start to get aggressive. More and more information. The button, the cutoff, the hijack. This is where we can start opening up a lot more when people are unopened to us, especially on tight tables. We can also start to play more of the suited connectors. Let's say we have a 4 or 5 suited, a guy opens under the gun, and there's 2 flats. 2 people flat. Well, we got a 3-way pot in front of us, and we have position with a suited connector that flops really, really well. Now we can start getting involved. Also, when it comes to what I'm trying to get at here is the difference between speculative hands like suited connectors and small pairs are very different. For 4 or 5 suited to flop a really big hand, like 2, 3, 6 or 4 or 5 king, the chances of doubling or winning a big pot, the more players in the pot, the better, as far as winning a big one. Now with pocket 2s, that might be a different story. If it comes 2, 5, queen, we're going to probably get some value out of something like queen 10 or just 1 pair. So the more speculative the hand, the more I want position and the more I want multiple people in the pot. Hoping to definitely look at an example like that today, and I hope this gives you a pretty good idea of some pre-flop ranges. If there's more questions on it or you want more examples, please let me know. All right, next up we are going to talk about some post-flop stuff. Continuation betting, draws, hand strength, pot control, a couple little things that we have up here on the board. After this, I promise we'll start to get to some hands. I know that just PowerPoint and discussion can be very boring and hard to hold attention, but I think it's good, especially to give an overview of certain things. Also, we're going to want to combine some of this post-flop stuff with the pre-flop stuff. For example, first thing we got up here is continuation betting. If we're in early position with pocket 10s and someone flats us behind as compared to someone just calling from the blinds, it's different information, and depending on the board, we're going to do some different things depending on the board and the information. So, with continuation betting, there's always factors to take into account. Draws. Hopefully most of you guys have a pretty good idea about outs, counting outs, having a pretty good idea of what draws get there often. If we're talking about a flush draw on an unpaired board, if we see the turn and river, we're going to get there roughly 35% of the time. If we have a flush draw with only 1 card to come, we're going to get there roughly 18 to 20% of the time. I don't know the exact, but I know that's ballpark. So if that's something that people need more help with, that's some basic stuff. You should be able to find some more information or post some stuff on the forums. Hand strength, obviously going to change how you play something post-flop. If we have pocket aces on an ace-9-4 board, or something else, let's say pocket kings on king-9-4 rainbow, where there's absolutely 0 draw. A lot of the time we're not going to go crazy and try to blow off people off hands because we really have nothing to protect. we've got a huge hand that we want to get value from. Then on the other hand, if it's pocket kings and we have position, but it's a draw-heavy board, we're going to want to look to protect those hands a lot of the time. So hand strength always is something to consider. Hopefully I can show some examples with different strength of hands. And again, if you guys want anything specific, let me know. Lastly is paw control. It can be a complicated concept for people brand new, or it might come very easy. It's just a way to use position and betting, or even being out of position, using bet sizing to keep pots small and get to showdown. So it's very, very important concept, and it will come into play early game, mid game, late game. A lot of this stuff will. Continuation betting is important at the final table and the first hand of the tournament. So is how to play a draw correctly. So is how to maximize value with a big hand or lose the minimum when you have a moderate strength hand. All right, so yeah, we're about 20 minutes into this episode. It's time that we are going to start looking at hands. I think that throughout the rest of this episode and the next full episode or maybe more is going to be purely early game hand examples. They can take up a lot of time and can get in depth. So please let me know if you want anything else that I've touched on, or if you feel that I didn't do enough on it. So all right, let's get into some hand examples from different positions. Alright guys, first thing I want to go over is just a couple pretty simple hands from early position. Just want to discuss two hands where there was different considerations for c-betting. Keep in mind these are completely different tournaments. This one with the nines showing. I think it's an early ante tournament or a rebuy right after rebuy period. We've already got antes in play. So yeah, let's get started. I open the nines here under the gun. I make it 200. I talked about going a full 3x early in tournaments. This one's a little bit different with the antes in play, and so yeah, I might start going a little smaller early, but it's kind of irrelevant at this point. We're deep stacked. It's still early game. I get flatted by a player who had been pretty active. That's what I had him noted as. I didn't really have an exact read yet, but he'd been active. Get flatted behind, and we go heads up. 6-6-9 board. We've got blocker for the heart draw, blocker for backdoor draws, stuff like that. This is a board that's pretty heavy, that I am happy to take it down right here a lot of the time, especially if I can show strength from early position. So the reason I bet this board is I want to protect my hand a bit. There's only one draw, only one over. I still feel that my hand has a lot of showdown value, and I'd like to get there. I'd like to get to showdown cheaply if we can, and also I have no problem just taking it down at this point and moving on. I bet 260 into 655. Look, definitely a little bit on the small end, but I do quite a bit. I do utilize a smaller C-bet a lot of the time, especially in the low stakes. I get called behind, and I feel like this could easily be some sort of float. Or the draw. I'm not afraid of overcards just because there's one. When you have a hand like nines, tens, jacks, a lot of the time there is going to be an overcard. When you have nines, it's probably 50, maybe even 55% that an overcard flops. Don't quote me on that, but I wouldn't be surprised if that's the number. So you got to get comfortable if you're going to be playing these hands out of position. You got to do a pretty good job of reading hands, and having reads on opponents or notes helps, but a lot of it's just going to come with experience. So I get flatted. I feel like he could float me with a lot of hands here. I'm going to reevaluate on the turn. Now, I don't necessarily need to bet like 7 or 800 here and get shoved on or have to fold to a big raise. I want to get to showdown. I still feel very happy with my hand. Check. Guy bets 600 into this pot. I'm definitely not folding. There's definitely some scary river cards that I can get away from this hand. Maybe some sort of heart. The ace of hearts, queen of hearts, something big. But we're gonna reevaluate on the river. And check. And I'm gonna call a lot of bets there, depending on the size. I still felt that my hand had a ton of showdown value, and he had been a pretty active player. Like I said, he had called a couple hands. So I ended up winning it with sevens. Main thing that I want you to get out of this, from the beginning, we're talking about c-betting and understand why I c-bet from under the gun in this spot. Hands got a lot of showdown value, and I wanted to keep control of the pot. I have no problem taking it down, and this is also the type of board where an active player could potentially float us. And he was floating us with sevens, another hand that had showdown value, but ace jack with one heart, other things like that shows up. If he raised us on the flop, it's a different hand, and we might have attacked it differently. But the main thing out of that is going to be just really wanted a quick discussion about c-betting a board out of position that's pretty draw heavy, but you're happy with your hand. Okay, ace king, a hand that a lot of people can have trouble with early in tournaments, especially out of position, early position, and from the blinds. So let's take a quick look. This is a very simple hand that ends on the flop or the turn, or on the turn. But I just want to kind of discuss why I didn't c-bet this flop. This is a very, very nasty board. We've hit nothing of it. We're looking for backdoor straight outs or flopping or turning an ace or a king. This is the type of board that I'm pretty reluctant to c-bet on, especially with position. I elected to check it behind here. I just don't want to get check raised on this board. It does hit a lot of a player's calling range, anything from 6-7 to a suited 8-9, even something like king queen here. If he's a really aggressive active player, we might get check raised. This is where I just feel like I want to keep the pot small. This is also an example of pot control. Keeping the pot small and in position. Another thing that I talk about a lot with the guys that I coach is at the low and mid and low stakes, guys will check to you on the turn a lot, whereas they understand that people will c-bet and they might get more antsy to check raise. When you're playing against relatively weak opponents, for the most part, which you'll see at the low stakes, they play much better on the flop than the turn, and I'll try to take advantage of that. So this is a spot where I'd definitely consider betting a turn. If he checks to me here with the two of spades, I'm not going to let him check to me twice. That's the reason that I have position, and a huge reason that and I just utilize it. So that being said, hopefully you understand here why or why not the c-bet didn't happen. And I fold, of course. So yeah, there you go. Alright guys, the next couple hands I want to take a look at are middle position hands with some different c-betting considerations. I want to show you three different hands here, all three of which I did c-bet for middle position, and talk about the reasons why for each. First one here is King Queen suited. Definitely going to be in my opening range here from middle position. I get flatted 2 spots. Good flop. Pretty wet though. 6-7 of hearts is obviously our biggest fear, or a set, or ace king. But I still flopped big. Big pair, good kicker. And I want to put out a c-bet here to see where I am. If both of them go crazy behind us, I can find the fold. But yeah, reevaluate, maybe thin the field to get it heads up, and then reevaluate the turn. Bet 255 into 420. Protect the hand a little bit. Don't want to give away too good of a price if there is some sort of draw out there behind us. We are able to thin the field. Now we're heads up. Turn card, pretty good card. I'm happy with this card. If he's got king jack, so be it. Well, considering the line that I take, but yeah, I feel like I could have got floated here. I feel there are quite a few draws, and I elected to check shove here. I also knew he was an aggressive player. Not really the point I wanted. The turn isn't as big of a learning spot for us considering the discussion. I just want to talk about why c-bet, considering that board, 2 guys to act behind. Just can't be given free cards there and have no idea where I am on if the 9 of hearts comes on the turn or something. I at least want to give it a shot at that point and see where I am. All right, next hand. Okay, this is a real simple one. This is nothing fancy at all. A hand that is very much in my opening range from mid to late position here. The suited Queen Jack. Still opening a full 3x at the 1530. I don't lower that until Annie's come into play or until about the 5100 level. So yeah, sticking with the 3x, and I get called 1 over. There's draws for the 5, 6, 6, 9, 9, 10, but nothing spectacular. This is just a dry board that I have position, and I was checked to. I'm gonna fire here more often than not, especially at the low to mid stakes. It's just simple, a little over half pot. Could maybe even have gone a little lower. But yeah, it just folds. It's real simple there. Nothing special. Just talk about the difference between that and the last hand and this next hand. They're all completely different spots. Next spot. All right, this is an example of making a big hand, and also, making a big hand and c-betting it for a reason. The point was to build the pot, and I also felt that it was the best way to go on the board. And this also goes with some maximizing value and building pots. Let's take a look. It's folded to us again. Pocket eights. We are absolutely opening up. Get called out of the small blind, and just a humongous flop here. Flop the nuts essentially, and very much smacks his range. Not 100%, but he could easily have an ace there. And if he doesn't have an ace, I don't know a lot of hands that we're going to get value from. Well, also, he could have king, queen of spades, which this would just be the gin board for us, because even if he gets there, we're winning. But yeah, checks to me. I fire 105 into 140 here for a couple reasons. Like I had said, to build the pot, and also, if he's got an ace, we want to build the pot and we want to get it in. And if he does have a spade draw or something along those lines, he knows we're probably capable of c-betting a lot of hands that aren't aces or pocket eights, and we might get check raised, and then we have the opportunity to reevaluate from there. As played in this spot, just get called, and I'm stoked. I feel like he's got an ace at that point, and now it's about maximizing value. That's another thing about a bet like that in that spot is if you check, you don't really have any idea. And you might lose some value then at that point because the pot's going to be smaller. So putting out a little bet there on this type of board can be very valuable. I get check to again, and there's no way I'm shutting down. There's no way I'm going to stop betting at this point. I feel like he's got a piece, and it's just going to be maximizing value. About 195 into 350 there. A little over half pot. I get called again. At this point, it's another running draw got there if he had something like 9, 10, or 4 or 5 of spades. And at this point, it's all about maximizing value. I feel that in this spot, if he's got some sort of draw that missed, whether I bet 300 or 700, it's the exact same thing. He's going to fold. If he has an ace, he's likely going to check shove us in a lot of spots. But if he has something like, maybe he made a real weak call with like ace 3 of hearts, he might just check call us. Might just check call like 9s, 10s, jacks. And, at this point, I was trying to get big value. And I bet just about full pot, 725 into 740. Unfortunately, he did fold. I might have lost some value from maybe 9s or 10s. Maybe that is the spot where I could have gone a little bit smaller to get value. But that's all right. What I want you to get out of this little discussion about those 3 hands is why I c-bet each in position. 1 was out of position, 2 were in position, and they were all 3 completely different scenarios. Hopefully, you guys get some out of those. If there's anything that I could touch on further for another short or episode down the road, please let me know. All right, guys. Now let's move on to some late position. A couple of these are from 6 Max. It's all good. They just seem to kind of encompass what I was looking for a little bit more than some of the stuff I had found from recent tournaments that were full ring. Also, 6 Max, you're essentially in late position at all times. You start in middle to late compared to full ring. So a lot of similarities as far as position goes, but also there was a few reasons. 2 of these were player based, and that's why I think they're a little bit better. Captain Mike Bass here limps. He had limped. He was a very active player, but not raising much. He something like a 30-10. I mean, maybe even more. He was limping a ton. He also was bad post-flop. So, I want to isolate this type of player, even with the suited connector. Any hand that flops well that I position with against a player that plays bad post-flop. And, I almost bet here, but I also said, Queen 10's very much in his limp call, or in his limping range. King Jack, stuff like that he isn't going to fold just to 1 c-bet. And I elected not to c-bet because of the player. I thought that he would very much let me know where he is on the turn, and I'm going to bet any turn card that's checked to me. And I actually hit a great turn card. It's pretty irrelevant. I go with my first read and gut and bet just over half pot here and get a fold. Not really worried about the post flop as much as to why I didn't c-bet or why I did, and in this case is why I didn't. All right, next hand that I have, another 6 Max. This one wasn't really, I don't remember this hand as in, I remembered that last hand and the next one against specific players. This one's just one of those situations where using position and just a little c-bet because you have some information of them checking to you is big. It's a nasty board, but I don't remember if they had been specifically timid or anything, but it's just a spot where I'm going to take a shot. My hand's good a lot of the time here. Kashmir can have just about anything. Who knows? This was the 5 rebuy on full tilt after the rebuy period, and I probably had some pretty good idea of what was going on at this point, but more or less just using position. I bet 450, so you can't really see that 4 Bet 450 and a 950 here, and luckily get folds. If we get calls, we can reevaluate. Um, Maybe fire again on a 4 or a 3, something like that. But we're focusing on the c betting right now, and that's a spot that probably comes up quite a bit. Not necessarily even a full under pair. Maybe we had sixes on 2-3 queen. One over. Situations are going to come up a lot. We talked about the nines I played under the gun early in the under the early position discussion, just a minute ago. And these spots are going to come up a lot with overs, and you'll get better at them with experience. But when you do have position and people checked you a couple times, there are definitely good spots to fire with hands like this. You don't have to do it every time. Mix it up. Especially try to do it based on the player. Hopefully we'll have some sort of read, and it's not just betting to bet. Okay, last hand of this little late position talk. A big hand, and this is also going to be the first 3-bet you see me put in. You have seen me pound a limper, but this is a pure c-bet. And we're going to take a look at the c-bet on the flop and why I elected to go with the sizing based on the type of read I had versus this player. Keep in mind that I might have played this hand and the sizing might have been completely different versus a different type of player. But Don Chich here, 2 to my right, had been very, very active, very aggressive. I think he had 4-bet once or twice already early in the tournament, and that's the type of player where I'm going to try to build a pot as early as possible and hope to get these aces in pre-flop. The way it went down, I'm actually surprised we didn't get it in pre, but that's all good because we ended up doubling. So I go for a 3-bet a little over 3 times his opening size. This is a little bit big for me. And once again, the reason is because it was versus the player. If I was just 3-betting someone without much information, I'm going to go a little bit smaller usually, probably 400, 425. Against someone like Don, who I know is capable of being aggressive pre and post flop, I might have even gone as big as like 600 here. Fully player dependent. So yeah, first 3-bet hand, but that's not really the biggest thing I wanted to look at. Okay, I know I'm doubling it. I'm doubling through any king, and I'm going broke to 7, 6s, or kings. If he doesn't have kings, he would have 4-bet pre. I'm 99% sure of that. So I kind of wanted to go with something that protects my hand, but also that gives him incentive to check shove. I bet just about full pot here. Kind of looks, it could be perceived as weak by a player like that or someone who's aggressive, and just look like I want to take it down right there. It's kind of my intent. Also, I've got the ace of diamonds. I'm feeling really good about my hand here, and he just spews over the top of me here with pocket nines. He's got backdoor draws, but come on. We're happy about that spot, of course. And yeah, big spot there. So, out of those last 3, a couple different types of to c-bet or not to c-bet. We didn't with the 6-7 suited for a reason, due to a read on the player, and we did c-bet very large with his aces for a reason, and the 4s was a little bit different spot. It's kind of more of a, not necessarily board, wasn't like anything special about it. No read. It was, I talked about just betting to bet, and that's not exactly what it was because we did have position, but it could be perceived that way. Either way, 3 different spots from late position. Hopefully they all make sense and help out. Alright guys, so we just took a look at some hands that showed some pre-flop ranges mixed with some post-flop play. We took a pretty good look at c-betting from different positions with different types of hands and for different reasons. And we got I think after our pre-flop range discussion, probably have a pretty good idea of the types of hands that I am playing. Now I want to take a look at defending the certain type or the types of hands we can defend out of the blinds, and just a little bit further discussion. Like I said in the pre-flop slide, I tend to play the blinds very tight as well, especially pre-ante and when the smaller big blind is such a tiny amount of your stack, especially from the small blind. You really don't want to be chasing 20 blind chip, especially when 20 chips, especially when we have something as weak as Queen 8 suited, like King 9 suited. I'll see that a lot, especially live. You'll see people defending their small blinds, even big blinds, with a array of hands that they really shouldn't. Just consider those blinds a sunk cost, something you're happy to get back if we do, but that shouldn't really alter or change the fact that you're going to be the first or second to act post flop, out of position the entire way, and it's just harder to play from there. So make sure to keep that in mind. If blind versus blind play is tough, and especially as a novice or intermediate player in tournaments, it can be tricky. Early in the tournament, though, we're still just so deep. Stick to being tight and look for good spots. I'm going to show you two hands here. Kind of just discuss neither of them. I mean, Ace Queen here is pretty big, but just talk about why I flat pre and just the benefits of it and why. Three betting here out of position. We do have a good hand. I'm absolutely happy to see a flop and play Ace Queen. I don't need to inflate the pot or three bet out of position here early in the tournament, especially without reads. I want to play tight. I want to develop these reads and go from there. So I flat his 3x raise. Also, another thing it does for you is because people do defend lightly, when we do flop a hand, queen high here or ace high, we're not going to get credit for it a lot. A lot of guys are going to c-bet behind, so we have the opportunity to maybe check raise or check call and continue to play a smaller pot. This is just calling on like an ace high dry board or queen high dry board would be another example of pot control. This would be out of position rather than check raising or betting leading out big on a really dry board. With just calling, we can try to keep it small and then reevaluate. Maybe try to get further value down the road in the hand. But let's kind of just focus on the pre-flop and flop for now. Here we do have a disguised hand, and he bets full pot behind us. I likely not that strong. Probably just trying to take the hand down. If he had something stronger, he would probably try to string me along. But who knows? It's also early. We don't have any reads. Great turn for me here. I was likely looking to check raise. Could also lead out here to protect against the king 10, ace king, ace 10 type of draw, the straight draw. But I like to check. I get check behind, and I don't get any action when I bet the turn, and that's one of another problem with being out of position is they have the information, and on that board, if he got some like sevens or eights, he could usually just check it down there, hopefully, and he's hoping for value. I bet on the river and don't get any action. So kind of the pros and cons there of flatting the ace queen there out of the small or out of the big blind. rather than 3-betting or inflating the pot earlier. We did get a little bit of value for top pair, top kicker, but we also didn't put too much at risk before we had a hand. So it's a nice little combination. All right, the next hand I want to take a look at from the blinds is pocket pair. Kind of going to lump in essentially deuces to sevens or eights or nines early in the tournament. I treat a lot of the pairs, especially the eights to jacks, a little, and even queens, a little bit lighter early in the tournament. Not 3-betting or, as willing to play a big pot as I am later. Once again, this just comes down to the fact that we are playing deep stacks still early, and I don't want to put a lot at risk. Also, with sets, I talked about this a little bit earlier. Queen 5-2, king, ace 2-7. Such a disguised hand, and if we can go up against a top pair good kicker, maybe 2-pair or an overpair, we can get a lot of value early in the tournament because it's so disguised. One of the hands I'm going to be more willing to flat out of the small blind are those small pairs because of the disguised strength. I'm going to fold. I'm going to fold 6-7 suited, 6-8 suited, stuff like that here, hands that I would play in position and multi-way, but just keep in mind how disguised these type of hands can be when we flop a set. And that's what happens here. So, now we talked about the pre-flop, why I do defend in this spot. Why I perceive there's value. Now we can take a quick look at some post-flop play because it is a good little interesting hand, especially for we talk in the post-flop slide. We talked about hand strength, maximizing value, and in a lot of these spots out of the blinds. Well, and here it's a pretty draw-heavy board, so I'm going to lead out. But even if, let's say, the 9 was instead the 8 of hearts, so we're talking about the 2 of clubs, 8 of hearts, king of spade board, I think it's a great pot, great flop to put in a c-bet, hope for a raise behind, and then reevaluate. Especially if you kind of go on the lighter side with your lead out, smaller side. People don't give you credit for it, and they'll float you and play the pot in position. So a lot of the time you can start to build the pot here on the flop with a set or disguised bottom 2 pair, something like that out of the blinds. So about 120 to 140, pretty big, especially for me. But like I said, the board was draw heavy, and I kind of want it. I want it to look like I'm trying to take it down there. Get a call. Three of spades brings another flush draw. But, I talked about getting floated, and a lot of the time this board is going to be bet on the turn. Check it back, and that's what happens. Now I want to raise, try not to give too good of a price to a draw if that's what he does have, get value out of a king, and maybe get him to shove something like king 9 or ace king. So I raise it up to 535. A little bit small again. A lot of this has to do with 6 max as well. In a 9-handed tournament, I'm probably going to assume the draws out there more often than here. Good river card. In a sense, the queen jack got there and the second flush draw show up, but it's still 6 max, and I'm still going to go with my line. I feel like I'm trying to get value, of course, and put out a small little thin bet here. This is kind of a weird bet here on the river. The reason being it was his stack size. I kind of felt it was either bet really small like I did for thin value, or shove. Pretty much my 2 options. I don't feel like I can bet like 900 or 1,000. If I'm gonna bet that much of it, or like 1,100, if I'm gonna bet that much of his stack, I may as well shove. So it's a little thin, but I thought that was gonna get me called. and I got called by Queen Jack. So, he had one of those pseudo draws. He had a gutter. It wasn't a humongous draw like Queen Jack of clubs. And, good to see the river there. I actually remember thinking, that was probably the perfect bet in that instance. And yeah, I'm glad that worked out. So, bottom line for those two hands, I still want to be tight, and those are two hands I'm going to play just because Ace Queen's big, flops well, and then deuces can just be so disguised if we flop, and if it comes queen 9 8, it's an easy fold. It's a hand that's not going to get us in a lot of trouble. So it's another added value to that type of small hand. All right, the last couple of hands I'm going to do today are going to be three more early game hands discussing a little bit further in depth the concept of pot control, why it helps. These were the first two hands were in position pots versus active players out of the blinds, and we'll discuss why I played it the way I did versus these players and why pot control is very beneficial. So it gets folded around to me. This is an early ante tournament on stars. As you can see the 54 in the middle. Not a full 3x. I only open 82 here. It's essentially the same thing. I do alter my sizing a little bit in these early ante tournaments. Might go a little bit smaller early and get a little bit more active because there is the added benefit of the ante, of course. Also, Kofi here in the big blind. I'd played a couple pots with him that were small already. He had been active. He'd defended a few blinds, and he's the type of player I want to play in position. So I raise it up and get called. Pretty good board here. I got second pair, a hand that I know's got a lot of showdown value and just a lot of value as a whole. Kofi had check raised in a couple spots, once on the flop, and I just didn't want to c-bet and get check raise and be put in a weird spot. Want to keep the pot small, and I want to stay in control and with position. So it went check. Good turn card for me. Now for me, it's going to start trying to extract thin value. I think I might get called down by something like an ace high, some other type of pairs, a 4 or a 5, maybe 8s or 7s. Hands like that. And also, if I just take it down on the turn, I'm fine with that. That's all good with me versus an aggressive player. I get called. Really good river card for me. All the draws missed. He'll probably give me less. I mean, he's probably not going to give me credit for a king anyway, as it is. And now with this one on the river, even more so. And now, those hands, those 8s, 7s, 5s, and a 5 and a 4. I can start to get value. I might also get value from ace high because he might give me credit for a missed draw. And that's actually my only regret here in this hand. I wish I would have bet a little bit bigger here. Something that kind of looked like I was trying to get a fold, not look as value-y as this half pot bet does. Something like 370 I think would have got me paid off as well. But, that's not the real focus of the hand. I just want to talk about why I check behind on a board like that rather than elect to c-bet. Also, just kind of how to combat those aggressive players that are capable of check raising and being really aggressive. The next hand I'm going to show is exactly that because it was versus a very aggressive player. All right, so I got pocket 8s here. Just open my 3x here in middle position. Ludwig A. been extremely active early in this tournament. Check raising an array of hands. He got there with a weird gutter. Just an interesting hand to start. So he flats me out of the small blind, and I know his range is massive there. It could be huge, it could be small. He's creative and aggressive. Board comes king 5 with no real draw. I like it. I also don't want I don't need to play a humongous pot here. This is another situation where I elected to check behind. Also, kind of looked a little bit soft. That I might get him to lead small into me. So a lot goes for us here. I just don't want to inflate the pot, especially when I'm happy with the strength and value of my hand, or what I perceive as value in my hand. Okay, we get a really good turn card. I'm going to get action from quite a few hands, I think, when he checks for me. I think he's capable of calling behind with ace high, some sort of 5-6, ace 5. But I also want to start getting a little bit of value. Yeah, that ties into the fact. I think I can get value from those type of hands, get a little bit of action. I might get check raised really big here and have to reevaluate or just fold depending on what he does. Could be perceived as weak, but, I know I can find better spots versus an aggressive player that I have position on a lot of the time. So I bet just under half pot. Get called. So let's reevaluate the river. If he bets into us, any board here, especially 7 or under, I'm gonna call a bet from him. A jack or something like that on the turn, I'll likely call some sort of bet. An ace I might fold, depending, but we get a pretty good turn card. We get a 9, and it's checked to us again. So I like to try to get thin value. I think that I can get called here by potentially ace high, and that's why I went with a little smaller bet size. I bet 250 into 580. I also think I'm gonna get called by a 5. If he's got like ace 9, or if he's stuck around with something weird, so be it. I lose a little bit of chips, but also that's what pot control allowed. It allowed us to not inflate a pot and get to showdown. Showdown versus aggressive players with hands like this is something we like to get to, and cheap if we can. And I actually might have got a little bit more value, but that's okay. He was creative enough to maybe put in a big check raise on the flop. He's obviously comfortable with 6s there, as shown by his call on the turn and river. So I think that was a pretty good example of pot control. And it's one of those situations where a lot of novice and newer players can get into trouble. We looked at pocket 9s from early position on a different board that was kind of pot control-y, but it was different. I tried to bet small to keep control of the pot, as far as taking charge and being the first to act. But they're different situations, and I hope that both of which had learning value for guys that have trouble in these spots. All right, the last hand we're going to take a quick look at. It's not fully a pot control situation. It's more with kind of pricing your draw. But at the same time, I also set up a play on the turn. So, this isn't fully pot control, and it kind of discusses drawing and getting value out of draws and maximizing fold equity. So this is kind of a culmination of a couple things we've talked about. I talked about not opening hands in early position that may be as light as ace 10. And also, this is a pretty tough table. If you guys know, Doc Sands is just phenomenal. Berkeley Boss is a friend and very good. The Oracle's a good reg. There might even a couple of other guys might be as well. I just don't know the name as well. But I was playing active this day and probably had a pretty good idea of what was going on at the table. And also, I don't remember exactly, but I could have been trying to play pots with these specific blinds. So I raised it up 3x, still early, like 75 blinds. We're still in the early game. We're pretty deep. So I get called in two ways here. 630 chip pot. Big draw for me. Pretty happy to have a nut draw. I hopefully have as many as 12 outs and good equity in this pot. Now, I elected to lead here. I think it was 230. Okay, I bet 225. Kind of small. The reason that I did this is to reevaluate if both guys go nuts behind me. Also, a play I like to make deep, especially from early position because it looks so strong, is if someone raises me behind a 650, I can shove and hopefully utilize my fold equity. From early position, I can easily have kings, aces, or ace, king here. I have the ace of hearts in my hand so that I could get credit for ace king of hearts, stuff like that. It didn't happen, but that's just kind of my thoughts with this sizing. Not only does it hopefully give me a turn card cheap where I can reevaluate, it also might take the hand down right now, and we also might be able to get more value by three betting over a raise. I get called in one spot, and I do remember now that Habban had been pretty aggressive and capable of floating. With the Oracle flatting on on the button pre-flop, the likelihood of just a pure float right here is probably less likely because he doesn't know what the Oracle is going to do. But I thought he could, and so I elected to try to get some value here. Also, the sizing allowed me to the flop bet of 225. It didn't inflate the pot huge, and had I made it bigger, maybe like 400, there'd be an extra 400 chips in the middle, so it'd be closer to 1500, and it would make this check shove for value on the turn. Well, I mean, not for value, but I had big fold equity. So what I'm getting at is the fact that the pot's 1080 here rather than 1500 just allowed me to check shove, utilize the fold equity, and it just looks so strong. And if I get called, I hopefully have a full 9 outs. I might also get called drawing dead, but that's obviously the nature of the beast when you get aggressive. This is also, I think this was this Sunday mulligan or a major on full tilt, and you got to take some shots, especially in the tournaments with tough players like that. You want to build the best stack that you possibly can. Luckily, he folded, and it all worked. So with that play, that's not purely a pot control thing, but it's also, I used a sizing to try to dictate my draw price, to try to manipulate the size of the pot, and it also gave me the opportunity to, like I said, put in that a good shove over a raise on the flop, or check shove like I did on the turn, and utilize my full fold equity and hopefully get a fold, which I did. Alright guys, thanks for tuning in here to episode 2 of the MTT Principles series. I hope this was beneficial. Looking ahead to episode 3, we're going to continue with the early game stuff, a lot more hands pertaining to this part of the tournament. We're going to talk about maximizing value more, take a look at some other draw hands. I'm going to try to find some really good early game folds or situations where we might fold a bit post flop. Talk about some inflection points, maybe getting short early, building a big stack isn't necessarily an inflection point, but we can talk about it. A couple creative spots, maybe some multi-way squeezes pre-flop or things like that. Some ways to try and use some creativity to generate some chips early in the tournament. So, thanks for tuning in for the second episode. This is Dang16 for Deuces Cracked. Have a good one.